Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with Jerome Sawyer, who's filling in for Rogan Smith. She'll be here next week. She's off and about, who knows where, gallivanting as we say. So
I'm following her.
Huh?
I'm following her on social media. She's having a blast.
Well, you know, y'all in that world. Y'all modern.
Yeah.
You know, I just watch, the most modern I could go is Netflix. You know, that's if it ain't happening on WhatsApp, I don't know what's going on. You know? Yeah, but listen, I spoke to you about this before, man. And I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to help you out.
Why are you trying to save me? What happened?
We on? We on, right? Yeah. I thought I heard some, like, load shedding type buzzes. You know, you would be in a happier place if you get off of social media. You know that, right?
What you talking about? No, man.
You're not in a happy place. You think you are, but you're not. I'm telling you.
It's an interesting place. Sometimes it annoys me. Don't get me wrong.
It annoys you all the time. You just don't want to admit it because I'm bringing it up. Okay? Let me tell you, man. I remember. You know, it's like I remember like when I used to smoke cigarettes, right? Mm-hmm. At the time, it was cool. Yeah. But I realize now how messed up that was. Your clothes were smelling. You know, you're killing yourself. Yeah, you can't breathe. You know, I remember one time. You know, when I started smoking cigarettes, I was about 21 years old.
That's when you stopped?
I was on. Yeah.
Wow.
I was on Christie Park. Okay. Oh yeah, well, I was smoking cigarettes from high school. Sneaking.
I was too, but I was far from 21 when I stopped.
Like you was what, 15?
No. When I stopped?
You stopped on the other side of 21.
No, I was approaching 40 when I stopped.
That's what I said, on the other side of 21. Sorry, on the other side of 21.
Yeah.
No, I was at Christie Park playing basketball. I'll never forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other people seemingly could run more than me. I was bent over, breathing. And I said, you know what? That's it.
It making no sense.
And the thing is, you see, I used to hate, I have a very weird quirk. I don't like certain things, and as a result, I don't do them. Okay? So, for instance, I didn't like people bumming cigarettes off of me.
Yeah.
Okay? And that was a big thing, right?
That was annoying.
And I don't even know y'all had that term, bumming cigarette.
Yeah, no more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as a result, I just stopped, and I never bummed cigarettes off anyone. Because you could get cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start noticing, okay, that smells. You know, because you don't realize it, but your whole house and closet smells like smoke. It's a kind of a disgusting thing. So what happens is you turn from smoking to it being disgusting. So while you're doing it, Jerome, while you're in social media, you don't realize how stink it is. Okay? You think this is life.
Deliberate sometimes, the things that I do, but go ahead.
I just tell you don't realize how stink it is. And this is what you do. I know what you do. I'm going to tell you what you do. Now, I don't know, are you a responder to posts?
Not all the time.
But you do?
Very rarely. Okay. Very rarely.
Do you post?
Yes, I do post.
Okay, so here's the deal.
But I post mainly for amusement.
Okay.
I don't get into a lot of issues.
Social debate and all that. Okay.
Yeah, and I into that, and I don't get into those back and forth things.
Because here's what your life is. I'm telling you what your life is. I'm guessing. First of all, you're probably either posting or responding to a post. It could be as late as 1 a.m. Yes or no, sir?
I don't respond late. No.
Okay.
No.
But you're reading it.
If I get it to pee, like.
Yeah, okay. but what I'm saying is, when you post something, you want to see the response. Subconsciously, you want to see it.
No, that is true. Yeah.
Okay.
People do post looking for likes and responses, and so that is
true. So you're wondering, is this accepted? Is this okay?
How many people is this going to offend?
And is someone going to say something bad, and then I got to feel angst?
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, the other thing you've done, and I'm telling you this, it's not a debate, it's a fact, is how many ever people were in your life prior to going on social media? That is now multiplied by about 1,000.
I can't see now. With me, it's different.
Why is it different?
Because
sir?
I've always been in the public eye, so I've known a lot of people, and I know a lot of people.
Excuse me, so did I.
No, I know a lot of people.
No, excuse me.
I wouldn't say that.
There are people that you didn't know that you now know.
That's
or they
true.
know you.
They know me. Yeah. No, I wouldn't. There are people outside of the Bahamas who I've sort of met through social media.
But what I'm saying to you is this: you have been on the news. Like I with the Guardian, although you had a much bigger profile than I did. Maybe not. I mean, I did 100 jams.
Yeah.
That was
exactly.
Okay. So but in those 100 jams, they didn't have any contact with me.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in the radio. I'm talking. They don't have contact.
Yeah.
If in 1993 we had social media, and I'd gone online, all of those people who, like, wanted to comment on my personality, etc., if I was online, boom, they're now in my life. These are people, you have a big circle, you have a big network of people that you know and that know you. But all of a sudden now, when you go onto that SM, and I don't even like how that sounds. Okay? All you had a BD in front of the straight. Okay? Actually, now that you think about it, that's what it is. It is sadomasochist. Yes, anyway, so when you think about it, you inflict pain, you get pain.
Yeah.
It's okay.
You enjoy it.
Did everyone think of that? Can I get some money by doing that? I got to market that, man. The thing is this, right? All of a sudden, thousands, and in your case, I'm saying thousands of people who you have no knowledge of and who do not know you personally are now in your life.
Yes.
And they feel the need to comment on what you are thinking.
Okay. I hear you, but I always looked at social media very differently. Okay. One, I don't have an open, in that you can sort of find me, but I'm very discerning about my friends.
You want for your show?
Huh? Yeah, I have one for my show.
Okay.
I don't manage that by myself. Yeah. But I do have one that I.
That's the only reason I went on was for the show.
I have one for the show. Mm-hmm. But in my personal space, I'm very discerning about who I accept friend requests from. In fact, I know people who send me friend requests I don't accept because I don't like them.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And let me tell you the secret to that. Well, I'm off of Facebook now to the extent that I'm still on, but I don't participate. Right. You didn't know if it was a hack. That's what you tell them.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure that's you. I wasn't sure that was you.
And I still ain't sure, even though you've alerted to me that's you. I'm still not sure.
But you know, one of the reasons I like it is that because you get to, like, I find out a lot of stuff of what's going on. Like, I find out what's going on in the world, and then I get the temperature of people. Like, I find out, like, I didn't go to the Independence thing on Clifford Park, right? Mm-hmm. And I made a joke about the fact that I was watching Risky Business as opposed to watching it on TV. Yeah. And a bunch of people came under the post and they were like, no, this year the show was really good. We really enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, well, maybe the show was good. And I accepted that. I was like, okay, well, maybe the show was good this year.
Or maybe they're wackos. But
no, but
I mean, I'm not saying it was. I hear it was good.
No, some of them I really was. And what I thought was interesting was people who I do respect came on and intelligently said, I haven't watched it in years, but this year it was really good. And I enjoyed it because, and I thought.
Well, mainly because they didn't have the terrorists.
Yeah, I get.
And the dogs.
The blowing up and all that kind of stuff.
But
no, people enjoyed the cultural show. They said it was really good.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, maybe the show was good. So without actually watching it myself or being there, I have a point of reference. I'm like, okay, so maybe this is. When the BPL situation started a couple of weeks ago, I was off the island that weekend. Yeah. So, but I knew that was happening based on the outrage on social media. I was like, oh, crap, I guess we have power
remind me that I want to talk about that as well.
So, it's a good way to gauge what's happening in the country.
I just found, this is me personally, maybe because it's a generational thing or whatever, and I don't want to be lost in it, that it was more negative than positive. Okay, that the net, the net thing was more. In fact, when you try to even assert something in an intelligent, civil way, the nutcases came out. And you know what? In life, the nutcases always, not in volume. Their remarks always sting more than the.
I delete some of them sometimes.
Yeah, I delete them. But certainly anything with any kind of.
And then some people are constant, like every day, 3 times a day.
Yeah.
If they pull out of the corner and someone will say, "Oh my God, these people," I'm like, "Come on, there has to be something positive in your life."
If you and I were having a conversation and it turned not to be civil, well, one of us would get up and leave.
Exactly.
So that's my thing on Facebook. I just got up and left.
Leave. I don't. There are certain posts or certain things that I will never comment on.
Right.
I'll never say anything because I know the minute I get involved in it, what's going to happen. And I know I have some views that are going to be contrary to what people. And then I don't like to get involved in that back and forth.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of hate because I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson. I made a comment about people who, about the concept of, and I'll tell you when I made it. I was on Dwight Strawn's show. And I said, to think that women aren't equal is stupid. I just said it just like that. Mm-hmm. And people went because they had their preconceptions about me, and that's fine. That's what you're in the public domain. That's what you got to do. But what's ironic about that, this morning I was coming into the show, and I was listening to Dwight, and Dwight was saying how certain things are stupid. So it's just about who they feel like they want to attack, what issue it is, and I just don't need it. I don't.
No.
We're going to take a break. I just don't need that kind of thing. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about independence, and what did I say I want to talk about? BPL, and there was another, and the racing. We'll be back.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, Ed Fields here with Jerome Sawyer, and he's filling in for Rogan Smith. Our guest this afternoon is Lowell Mortimer, who. The only way I could describe Lowell, and I've known him pretty much all my life, is accomplished. And we'll talk about the various accomplishments when he gets in. So it's going to be an interesting conversation because, you see, we have there are lots of people in this community who are extremely accomplished and have achieved monumental things, and they're not out there like that. They don't put themselves out there like that. And it's not just a matter of talking about certain issues all the time. It's good for people to know about who exists in this country of ours and the contributions they make without it being, always controversial.
It's important for us to aspire to accomplish.
Right.
Because a lot of times we don't see the successes, we don't, or what we see is very skewed sometimes, or we see the same set of people, or we see people that we don't want to emulate. So it's good to know that and to appreciate that.
It's always on a topic. You don't need to have a topic. You can talk about these accomplishments with how the impact they've had. There are people in this country. Like, for instance, we had Mother Pratt on the other day, and I don't know if we spent. Ken could correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if we spent 5 minutes talking about politics. The mere fact that we talked about her life and her and the things that you would not have believed.
She caused me to go to college, right?
No, I didn't say that. So you go.
When I came out of high school, I was 16 years old, and she went to my mother. She said, "Annie, what you doing with this boy?" And I was just chilling. And Mommy was like, his sister Hope is in at St. Aug. I'm going to bring you the application. My mother just came home one day and she had this application.
And she used to take children up there.
I knew I was going to college.
Okay.
And I lived with her.
So you like Mother Pratt then?
I love Mother Pratt. I grew up where she lives is right across from my grandparents' store in the Grove. And so I love Mother Pratt all my life.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to say you love people like that.
Oh yeah.
If that level of kind of, I don't even want to use the word camaraderie, but connection or getting. Like she and I did things together, right? That, again, people will never know about it. It's not that I'm not going to say them, but it had nothing to do with anything except getting the thing done.
Yeah.
So
she has a genuine concern for people, and she was concerned with getting, and still is concerned with ensuring that young Bahamians got an opportunity to continue their education.
Right.
I walked into a police station. I was doing something with the police. Let me just say that. That's my disclaimer. No, it was work related. And in that station were two police officers, two females who I'd gone to college with, who were working in that station. And when I said to the people, I said, I went to college with them. They looked. They said, really? I said, yes, we all went to college together. That was again thanks to Mother Pratt. She was
she told the connection. Anyway. Yeah. She's straight for life. Oh yeah. I can tell you that one.
Yeah. For
Another one like people like that is like Betty Cole and people like that. Yeah. But listen, so. I wanted to talk to you about two things. Specific independence. And just very brief. I think we had a decent independence. I think people enjoyed, because there seemed to be a lineup. We talked about this before. I was talking to someone about the holidays, and it really seemed to be like a holiday season because it started from the Friday before with the Pride and the Folk Festival and then so on and so on. And people participated, man. And they wore their colors and, things were pretty quiet and they had a good time. It
was a great holiday. And 46, you have to realize, is an interesting kind of celebration. You celebrate 40, 45. Yeah. So, it's that time in between. But it was a decent celebration. You had people that came out. People liked the cultural show. Yeah. The feedback I got was people
maybe we're transitioning to something
we are,
more, rational.
And then people celebrated, in their own groupings up to, I think I left the house about 7 o'clock last night to come, and it was still bumper-to-bumper traffic. People were out doing stuff. They were on the beach. They were reveling. Yeah. So it was good.
It's good.
People enjoyed it.
Well, patriotism, if it grows, it's only a positive thing.
And people are still wearing, even today, people are still wearing Bahamian colors. They're still, their cars. I always smile when I see cars decorated. We have cars decorated, buildings.
Especially when they stick the flag on the car. They just I bought it with no creativity. Just get the flag and sticking it on the hood, flat. So the two things, I don't, we're in the journalism business or the media business. Our good colleague Clint, this thing with where this report was made. Mm-hmm. I'm a little, I spoke to Clint. I'm not going to get into what he and I discussed, right? But do you think that there's such a, because it ties into the other subject, which is this racism thing, right? Racism thing, right? How ready were we to just believe that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? You're just ready to believe certain things. I mean, I happen to know the story behind the story before, all of this, so I knew it was not true. But how do you do that without the kind of... See, I said, this is what I said. If you came to me with a story, and as much as I trust you, I am not going on the air calling no one name without checking that. You better have some backup, or kind of backup.
And this is of course no dig at any individual. But I had a journalism teacher who told me, if your mother comes and presents you with information, you check that.
Get some documentation.
Get some hard. And I lived at my mother, during her lifetime. Anyone who worked with me would tell you. She used to call the newsroom all the time and say, "Did you all hear about so and so? You all know about so and so?" That was a thing. Yeah. But I'd be like, "Okay, thanks, mommy. Let me check." But that's for me. That's a fundamental. That's a fundamental tenet of journalism, and I think. One of the things that we have gotten away from, and it's because I think we look outside too often and to our neighbors to the north as the example. Yeah. But for far too long we've gotten away with going with speculation and information, or he said, she said, as opposed to Ed could say anything. But I need to have evidence. I need to have proof. I need documentation. I need some corroboration.
Some sort of,
I'm telling you.
Various,
yes. But even beyond that, Ed, it's like people will people say things, particularly in the political sphere. They'll say, well, this happened and that happened, and it's just a matter of going back and fact checking.
That's all.
And say, the government did this, or the opposition did that, or didn't do that, and it's just a matter of going. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not true.
Doesn't matter. He can
again, if we're using that as the barometer, we'll then throw everything out the window.
Oh, he's a terrific guy. No, I'm not a fan of his. The thing is this: I disagree wholly with. Learned counsel Fred Smith, who said we ought to get away with criminally intent libel or whatever the thing is. Definitely not. That's I'm not big on traditional things, quote unquote, but that one, because it creates a degree of responsibility.
It has to.
Okay.
Be. People can defame you and say things to destroy your reputation and sully your character.
Right, and you never can recover from it.
And you will not. And let me tell you something. People will always remember the first story.
And by the way, people are predisposed to believing something.
They will never believe. They are not going to remember the apology, the retraction.
And they ain't going to remember the list of shareholders, which shows that they... No,
I can tell you, is that one... Well, you remember that time they did say... Or, he was mixed up, or, she... the story had been refuted many times.
This story with the gold medal, with the the water polo?
Water polo.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but on like the 6th or 7th page of the Tribune today, maybe the Guardian, I don't remember which one, was a story from actually the head of the water polo team who said the government and the aquatics thing had nothing to do with it.
Oh, no, we didn't hear that. No.
Okay? Mm-mm. So what I'm saying to you is we heard about, we heard the aquatics guy denying it, but then, that's put there to say, but, he probably, he probably guilty anyway. You probably heard the government side denying it, but hey, they're the evil ones anyway, right? Yeah. And you heard the accusation. But you didn't actually hear from the team who said, no, we made these plans long ago and we knew we couldn't have that thing, and we never made application.
Because when somebody said it to me, I said, well, they had to know when the event was taking place. I said, well, obviously it was on them if they made reservations to come back, the day before the thing ended.
They knew ahead of time they didn't have money to go.
But let me tell you, I take a very different approach just because of how irresponsible we have become as people just with information. Whenever I see something, I now look at it with a greater degree of skepticism.
Well, that's the thing. You lose your credibility.
I question everything now, and I go, you know what?
That can't be true.
That can't be true. I need more facts. So let me wait to hear the rest of the story. And people come to me, they say, Jerome, you hear, and I always say to them, wait a minute, let's wait to hear the rest of the story. So when it all started, I said to several people, let's wait to hear the facts. I said, because, as somebody once said to me, we have a habit of not letting the facts get in the way of a good story.
Then I want to just real quick, because again, I want to highlight the fact that Lowell Mortimer is going to be, and he's going to chastise me, I know, because because if I said Mortimer, that's a problem, because it's not, it's Mortimer. And that's his correct name, so that's what we should say. With Bahamian, we bastardize everything. BPL. Now, here's the deal. We know the situation. There's announced there's going to be load shedding till September, October. We know that the engines, which were not purchased by Ms. Dolowesco, are going to be installed by October, November, right? We know all these facts. And let me make everyone aware of this, because they're going to say that I'm not sympathetic and all that sort of thing. No amount of screaming or rowing or whatever is going to change it.
Won't make it happen any faster.
It could get worse. It could get better. But until those engines are installed, it's, voice your anger, voice your displeasure. I don't know what to say, but it's easy because it's easy stuff, right? It's easy fodder, right?
I take the view, let people sound off if that's what they want to sound off. So when I see people sounding off, I go, okay, well, you need an outlet. It's hot.
It's very hot. Very hot. 5 hours without hours
that's a hell of a long time.
Now they got a load shedding schedule.
Yeah.
That means nothing.
Right,
because what's going to happen? Something else can happen.
Yeah,
and then you'll say, well, you see this, they lie.
Yeah.
No, that's why they didn't want to do a schedule in the first place, because they knew that something could happen, and then you'd say they lie.
The other fear, which they would have said from the very beginning, is that those who have criminal minds will use it as an opportunity, to go out and do foolishness. And so, heaven forbid, something should happen that's related to that. But, it is an extremely
criminal's always
unfortunate.
Ready. Huh? They're always ready.
That's true, too.
So as soon as they go dark, they're ready.
Yeah, that's true. But they dark.
See,
they got to be dark.
They know from June, they load shedding. So let's be ready,
No, but, I sympathize, I empathize, when I see people, and I don't say, that's one of the things I never comment on
I'm hoping
Facebook,
I'm hoping that these months will go by quickly.
Yeah.
And that maybe that by some miracle, some speeded or expedited scenario will happen.
If you can have an alternative. I mean, if it is that, you come home in the evening and your lights off, go on the beach. Spend a couple hours trying to cool off, or go to the movies, keep a couple of dollars, go sit in Starbucks, go do something to, go somewhere.
Somewhere with a generator.
I go to Nesbitt's,
They have a generator? Nesbitt got a generator?
Yeah, from time.
No, man.
Yeah, but anyway. I don't know if hurricanes are.
No, so I just hope that, like I said, you never know. I mean, I know that I think that the BPL people have always kind of, maybe in some instances, even not announced things with hope that they could do it, but they don't want to announce it.
Yeah, that's a tough job.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a tough job, but the only thing that I say about, and I know the people involved, I know Darwin Moxie. I know he's working, just nonstop on a more or less voluntary basis, to be honest with you, to get this thing right. He's extremely absorbed and immersed in what needs to happen. A plan has been outlined. Quincy, I think, is starting to get their communications thing on the thing. And because you have to do that. You have to give people information. And, hopefully there will be some time in the reasonably near future where this will be behind us, and that what will be devastating. And you and I will be on the march, and we'll be with the placards, is that by next summer this is not resolved.
Right.
Okay? Yeah. Because now you're telling me, okay, you got the solution, you got the engines, you got this, hook them up.
As far as I'm concerned, you have a pass until November.
Right, because you told me a plan.
Yeah, you have a pass.
It doesn't
until
make
November.
me feel better that I'm in the heat.
No, I still mad. I give you that pass.
I'm just not in a revolutionary state.
Yeah. Now, you come December, January.
Yeah.
I
get in a beret. Shay too. Okay.
I grow my hair out.
Yeah. cliche too, man. Okay?
But, it's unfortunate. And again, this isn't something that just started.
No.
And I have to remind you, it's so funny. And the other thing that's interesting about social media is nowadays it allows you, because it's had that feature, that memories feature that allows you to go back and see what you were posting about. As far back as 2010, I was posting about power outages, and I could see it around this time. And it's interesting because a couple of times I thought about reposting these things, and I said, Jerome, leave it alone. But I look at my own feed, and I was complaining
Jerome,
all these years
I'm
ago.
6 years old. This has been going on since I was 10.
Listen, I know as a reporter going down to Blue Hills and Clifton Pier when they had these outages. I know, but covering these things over and over again. This is not a new
I'm
situation.
hoping that in the same way that we complain, I'm going to use this comparison, even though it's not as inconveniencing and debilitating as this. The same way that for many, many, many years we complained about traffic flows in some areas, like Prince Charles, etc. And then when we decided to fix the roads, we said, okay, we can fix the roads by X date. But when they dig the roads, they find all kind of pipe break and this thing and the next thing. So it was just misery.
That was a nightmare.
It was misery.
But
the only thing that the government has in this case on its side is that they're 2 years out from the election.
Yeah.
Because don't fix it a month before. Because I just, my hand in a position of tick. You see? It's just I walking around in a tick position.
I asked, prior to the election, I had interviewed former Prime Minister prior to the last election. He was on my show, and I asked him, about the things that he thought led to his defeat. And he said the roadworks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He said that. He said the people were just angry about those roadworks.
And it didn't matter that 2-3 days, a week before the election, you could roll smooth. No. Hey, you know what it is? It's like when you get in an argument with your wife or your significant other. Okay, the argument over, but don't just expect me to just be nicey right away. Come on some time.
Okay?
Yeah, don't,
why are you so mad?
Because I was just unmad 2 minutes ago. I can't be completely unmad nice. Yeah. Okay? It's a transition period from mad to okay.
I try to get it together. But honestly, and unfortunately, it's affected us in so many ways. People have lost business,
health
bookings,
issues,
all kinds of things. And
you just
really
hope that what we're feeling now is that pain of transformation.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, that's what we went through with the roads. I mean, again, nothing in comparison to this power thing.
Yeah.
But we went through a pain of transition, of transformation.
Those roadworks were tough.
Yeah. And so we had to, you know why? Because we allowed things to get so bad for so long. And there's many elements in the society like that.
He said to me, during the same interview, he said, what we did should have been done 10 years prior to that.
Right.
And he admitted that during his last time in office, he should have done it.
Yeah.
And he said everything was in place. He said, but we chose not to do it. He said, but we should have done that 10 years ago. Right. And that's why I was saying, because I remember, again, covering that, sometimes they would open the road and they would get a plan from BEC, Patelco, the water and sewage, and when they opened the road, nothing made sense.
No.
Everybody's pipes all over the place.
So. All right. Well, listen, we're going to take a break. We're going to take the news break, and we're going to then invite our guests in. Lowell Mortimer from many spheres, the LJM, your Maritime Academy. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. From Campbell Shipping, and of course he's a learned attorney. I almost said colleague. What the hell am I saying colleague for? I'm not a colleague. It just sounds good. That's what I see here in court.
Yeah,
when we cover court? My learned colleague. So I'm saying he's my learned colleague. But he's my learned friend, I can tell you that. So we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say this. From time to time, first of all, I'm here with Jerome Sawyer, who's standing in for Rogan. She'll be back on Monday. But from time to time, we have shows where we're not just discussing some sort of, topical issue of, controversy and salaciousness. Every now and again, we have some people on who are, I think you have to almost put them at the label of iconically accomplished, and that people know who they are, they see them about, but they don't really realize the depth of these people, because the true icon, and there was, and I'm not going to call the name, but some young man once said that people think of him as an icon, and icons don't do that. Okay, all right? That's like precisely what an icon doesn't do, because everyone else realizes that they are iconic, and that somehow their thread through the society is deeply stitched. Mm-hmm. I just said that, Jerome. I just made that up. You want to write that down so I can remember it for another time? The thread is deeply stitched. Okay? I can recall it. And I think that this gentleman, who I've known, well, he's known me before I know him, all my life, and yet every time that I saw him accomplish something, it just kind of wowed me. It surprised me. Like, where did that come from? Our guest this afternoon is Lowell J. Mortimer. He reminds me about that every time, by the way. So I'm now, it's ingrained in my mind because, when we were growing up, where are you going to get the snowball? Mortimer's.
Those people say Baltimore.
Baltimore.
That's what we were accustomed to.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't that bad, Lowell. But Lowell Mortimer is of the Mortimer family from East Street. And the icon, there's many parts of iconic. One of them is the best ever candy kitchen. Is that correct? That's the fact that I didn't even think of that, and it just came out of my head. Best ever candy kitchen.
There are a few people who know it as that.
Best ever candy company, and then some people say the candy kitchen.
The candy kitchen
for short.
Yeah, and Peanut Square, Snowball, Benny Cake, coconut cream.
I have told you a funny story. For years, I always associated that with going to funerals, because my mother dragged me to every funeral that she ever went to, and on the way in between the church and the graveyard, you always stopped to get a snowball and peanuts. And so for years, as a child, I associated that with going to funerals. Like, that's what we did.
And by the way, there's no snowball that you can get that tastes like a snowball from there. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. No. By the way, I almost lost my life at Mortimer's Candy Kitchen because, the step used to be in the front. Mm-hmm. And one day I stepped out, and, it was right on the road. And I stepped out, and someone pulled me back, and a car whizzed by. The steps have changed now.
I wasn't so lucky one time. I stepped down, I got hit.
Really?
Broken left arm, collarbone.
Wow.
As a child.
There you go. So let me ask you. Now you are the brother of whom? Give me the family history.
Well, there are 6 boys, 4 girls.
Mm-hmm.
There were 10 of us. Iris, the eldest, Bernard, Olivia's father, Lester, whom you know, Junior, Carmichael Road, Esther,
I didn't know how that
Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Weston,
yeah.
Then Joan, Lowell, that's me, and who now lives in Houston, and Philip.
I don't think I knew Philip that well. And of course, this is my history now because I also grew up on the Fort, and we were very, very close with the Mortimers. And there was not a Sunday we didn't. I can still smell, I don't know what it is, the smell of peas and rice and fried chicken on the beach. You know that smell? It's just, it's just a kind of a smell that's ingrained in my head.
That was typical picnic cuisine at that time, wasn't it?
Picnic cuisine. You're in the cuisine business now, by the way. Another thing people don't know, you're in that business. But tell us just briefly, because you know what I thought? I thought to myself, and I don't know what happened, that Best Ever Candy Kitchen should have been like the equivalent of See's Candy. See's Candy started out of San Francisco and just became a international brand. But tell us how Best Ever Candy Kitchen got started, and why it obviously was very near and dear to many Bahamians, but it didn't like, why wouldn't they in the food? I guess they are in the food stores, but tell us why you think it didn't grow to the extent it should have grown.
Well, I think number one, it was over the hill business, and then it passed through many hands after my father. My father, my elder brothers, and so forth. And it's now down to a fourth generation. But I think it's making its renaissance right now. But I think also back then there was no protection for manufacturing, local manufacturing.
Okay, so there was still all the imports.
Yeah, later government started to protect for hard candies, not chocolate.
Right.
And so I think the store has benefited from that.
Okay.
And then, as you said earlier on, the shop was iconic, a standard where people went for an outing on Saturday for their popcorn, peanuts, snowball. So I think all of that helped to keep the history of it going, keep it in people's mind, but unfortunately it hasn't been able to expand internationally. And I think it has to do with the shelf life of the candy, the packing, the
packaging, all that sort of thing.
Because,
I remember, I don't know if you know this.
I
don't know if you know this, but when Atlantis first opened up, I remember Cornell, I think, approached me about getting candies into the store. And, in those days, there's still wax paper on the mints and things like that. Well, obviously, that wasn't going to fly, from a global standard. And we assisted in Errol Cohen with packaging them into things where you could stick it on the hook, that kind of thing. It's still maybe wax paper, but in the thing,
But I think since then they got the machinery to do cellophane wrap with their name brand on it and so forth. But you got a big pushback from the old ladies of the church. So you couldn't open the paper in church so well as you could the wax paper.
They had to put it with the teeth. They
couldn't do it in your face.
But the wax paper, they were able to open it, quietly.
Quietly, yeah. Well, that's a piece of folklore right there. But I mean, it is. Did you would have been in the heyday, obviously. Now, first of all, when did it get started?
I think they just celebrated 90 years.
Wow.
I can't come back that far, but that's like what? 1920 or something like that?
The late 20s.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Now that in itself, I don't say this, but I'm involved in a business, Joker's Wild Comedy Club, and this year we're going to celebrate 30 years, which is it's a decent period of time. But I mean, 90 years. And a black Bahamian business.
That's
I don't think that exists. There's not any equal, is there?
No, but what I think the area needs? The development of that whole Fort Finn Castle into what it ought to be, the restoration of the water tower, Fort Finn Castle, 66 steps, all of that, Queen Staircase, all of that I think needs to become a center. A cultural center that needs some development.
Well, I was talking with Scott Cadet, so I know you because he's acquired quite a bit of property.
He's looked at it, yes.
Yeah, and he and I were talking. In fact, we drove the area, and because of how it's situated, where the boundary is Mason's Addition, for instance, and essentially there's the hill. And I don't know how many people realize how the fort is, the Fort Finn Castle area is kind of divided and gridded. But it seems to me, Lowell, that with the right, first of all, there are very nice homes back there. They're old homes, many two-story homes, et cetera, et cetera. But the way that it's done is that if it could be preserved and developed, it could be sort of a combination of a historical district as well as, to me, like an artist enclave. I've envisioned where these homes that are not huge homes could become properties of artists, etc., and they could be doing their thing.
Like what they do
bistros,
to the Great Cliff,
right? And places like Wynwood and places like that, right? Yeah. Where it becomes an enclave where people can go and see Bahamian art, see Bahamian music, experience Bahamian food.
And there are lots of wasted spaces in the area too that can do with development and assist with promoting
I was talking to Scott. I said, the fort, for instance, I grew up literally on the fort. Literally on the fort. Not a Sunday didn't go by if we weren't at a picnic that I wasn't flying a kite. We used to tie up the kite, Jerome, onto the fort banister, go home, eat lunch, come back, the kite's still flying.
Or just skating around.
Skating
the
around, right?
In the streets.
Wow.
There should be no vendors on there. What should happen is
the
they can
tower
acquire. No, it's not in good shape. They should acquire properties around the area, put vendors on those properties, create a pristine garden scenario on that fort. It's not a huge area. Restore the water tower, obviously the fort itself, and it would be and the Queen's 66 steps, and it would be with the waterfall. I mean, does that waterfall work now?
I don't know.
Did you ever know there was a waterfall there?
I've seen pictures of it.
There,
By the way,
I've seen pictures of it.
did you know that I was on the board at the airport? Did you know that when you go up the stairs to the terminal, that's where it got the inspiration to have that waterfall in the stairs? It was
Really?
the 66 stairs, yeah. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. I wish we had you for 2 hours. We'll be right back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with Jerome Sawyer. Our guest this afternoon is Lowell Mortimer. See, I can't. I'm behaving, Lowell. I can't help myself. But you can tap me on my head every time, okay? All right, so as I was saying to you, when you were growing up, and of course, people don't have a vision of what they consider over the hill today, of what over the hill was, okay? And if you, for instance, and just do it if you have a chance. You drive through the Hay Streets, you drive through the Meadow Streets and these streets, and you look, turn to your left, turn to right, and you can see substantial homes in those areas, okay, that still exist. People don't think of it like that. Have you done that, Jerome?
Listen, I had it even better. I used to take my grandmother, while she was alive, to the Over the Hill reunion when they would have that. And I would go with her and sit and listen, and she would be there, of course, with all her contemporaries. And that was such an eye-opening and an awakening for me. So a lot of the areas you talk about, like I drive to Meeting Street, and I remember my grandmother saying to me, what a beautiful street Meeting Street used to be. At one time there were these wonderful homes, etc. And all these streets, and we would talk about what Over the Hill was like. But we don't have an appreciation. First of all, we don't do a good enough job of reminding people of what it used to be. You talked about the fact that your family business is celebrating 90 years old. That should be a significant thing. Every Bahamian should know that. That should be a sense of pride for us. And then we forget, or we don't talk about, these areas and who are the people who came from the areas and who are they now in our society and what they once looked like.
Well, Lowell, you would have been, in your view, would you have been considered middle class, rich? How did you see yourself as you were growing up?
I think we were considered middle class.
Right.
We were not rich,
right.
but we were avant-garde in terms of what we were provided with, high school education, or going off to college, and that kind of thing. So we were. Now we were a popular family
because of you selling the good stuff. You selling. Hey, that's like the drugs of the day. Let me go get some mint.
We're a good family, and then I think because of that, I think this has helped me, my older brothers and sisters, friends. Just your father. Orville Turnquist, all of them were friends. And like my parents always had a South party, New Year's Eve. So all of that. It
was a small community, though.
Small community, and they all came to us before going to Junction.
Right. Well, you were positioned well.
Yeah. So I got to know a lot of people who later gave me help when I needed it.
Now you decided to go off and study law. Or did you article?
No, I went off to study law. Actually, my degree is in biology. I went to do a pre-med.
There's another little mystery that unravels itself.
I took a pre-med course at Bethune-Cookman.
Okay.
And after I got my degree, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do medicine anymore. Right. Then, of course, my cousin Granville was established already in medicine, and
one of the best orthopedists you'll ever run across.
And so I said, I was uncertain. So I said, what I would do is I would teach for a while biology in the schools for a while. so that I would keep in touch with my subject matter in case I decide to go and do medicine.
Right.
But I enjoyed teaching, and so I taught for about 6 years.
Okay.
And then at that I said, well, I don't want to go into administration, and teaching for me would be a dead end.
Right.
And I decided that then I would go off and do law.
Okay.
And so I went to London and became a member of Lincoln's Inn.
And then you joined Cash Fountain and Bow? Was that
No. Interesting again.
Uh-huh.
When I came back, Hubert Ingram had just been called to the bar. He started off his firm, Hubert Ingram and Company. Christie was to join in July, and Hubert gave me my first job, just down here on Christie Street. Loftus Rokas Building. And so I worked with him for 6 months. Then Darrell Roll was appointed minister, and he asked Hubert, since Perry was joining him, he didn't have a Bahamian in his firm, so he asked would I join.
This is Perry
Christie.
He didn't have a Bahamian in his firm.
No. Darrell
didn't have a Bahamian in his firm.
So
into the cabinet.
Christie was joining Hubert to become Christie Ingram and Company.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went and joined Darrell's firm.
Right.
So then I was the only
non-Bahamian. Bahamian.
Yeah, I was only
Black
Bahamian there.
Bahamian?
I was only Bahamian. Jack Duffus was there, but he wasn't called to the bar.
Right.
He couldn't notarize and stuff like that. So I did that.
I have no idea what you mean by that.
What?
He could not arise?
Notarize.
Oh, notarize. Okay. I had notarize. I said arise. It's like this is some legal term. Like he couldn't pass the exam or something like that. But no, he couldn't notarize. Okay.
And then that very August, old, sort of scraggly-looking man walk into the office and say, I want to see a lawyer. I want to open a bank account at Scotia. And his name was George T.R. Campbell. And I helped him open the account at Scotia. He incorporated Dockerdale Shipping Company, which I did for him.
Which year would this have been?
1973.
Okay.
Dockerdale Shipping Company. Then he said he wanted to create a trust, and so over the next year and a half or so I worked on a trust. He lived in Japan at the time, and then I started going to Japan.
Was he an Englishman?
Scotsman. George Campbell. And then he wanted to create the Freedom Foundation, which I became a trustee of the Freedom Foundation. And slowly the Dockerdale started to establish ships here, and I was in and out of the office. I was an officer of the company and also trustee of the Freedom Foundation. I managed that here for him. And the communication between here and Japan, and that was the genesis of Dockerdale and Campbell Shipping.
I always wondered how a lawyer in the Bahamas becomes a shipping magnate. You're a shipping magnate, aren't you? I mean, that's in the real terms, you are a shipping magnate. You headed one. I mean, Campbell is a fairly large company, is it? Is it not?
Well, it was one of the biggest shipping company, shipbuilding company. Because George Campbell was a marine architect.
Okay.
And he.
Not surprising for a Scotsman. That's what they do.
And his background also was that during the Second World War, he moved to Canada, helping the Allied forces rebuild ships to enter the war.
I want to interrupt you for a second because, one of the things I wanted to really explore was how you got into shipping, and you've shown us the synthesis. But what's interesting about that is we have a phobia in this country about letting the outside in. And we've always said on this show that, George Smith said that, when the PLP took over, they focused on creating jobs, not opportunities. And that's maybe where we went in the wrong direction. But here walks in this man, a white man, I assume, and this is ironic, the discussion we're having now, who came about a young black Bahamian lawyer and formed a relationship with him, and you ended up heading that company because of that relationship. And that's really what happened, right?
Yes.
And so how do you speak to us not being so close-minded that we've actually kind of shut the door? And I understand that we've also been exploited. I get that. But that's where you have to monitor. But you have to open the door and monitor those situations as opposed to closing the door and not ever having opportunity come in. How do you speak to that, Lowell, with the experience that you've had about how we need to shift our mindset with this kind of insularity that we have?
Well, I think as you said, we have to be open to people coming in, and I think we have to be prepared to learn from people coming in. George Campbell, I learned a lot from him because he was very wide in things he was interested in. In Canada, he was a sort of gentleman farmer, had vast acreage there, and he was a gentleman farmer while he was there. In Japan, he almost single-handedly rebuilt the Japanese shipping movement. All of this I learned over the years. And so he became very iconic in Japan, and he lived and died in Japan.
And he, at some point, or the board of that company, because this is to me a remarkable story that Bahamians don't know, and you're not the kind of person who's going to go out there waving a flag. At some point, he handed his company, or the board of that company handed them that over to you.
Yeah, there were 3 trustees initially when he started to fade. One was a Greek lady. A conflict arose and she had to resign. Then a Mr. Yamada, who was also honorary consul of the Bahamas to Japan. He and I were the sole trustees, the 2 of us. Mm-hmm. He became very ill just about 16 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so about 6 months I had to carry the company by myself. I had to go to Japan like once every month. And he eventually died, so I was just left there. Mm-hmm. And so I had to manage, but I was in touch with the company, so I was able to just manage the company and carry out the settlers' wishes, George wishes, mm-hmm. Make sure his family was taken care of and the people who work for. And so I managed the company, and then I changed ultimately the makeup of the company and who did what. And well, it never left here.
It never left here. Okay.
Never left here from 73. It just expanded.
I find that to be a remarkable story, and I tell you what is even more remarkable, and I say this to you, Lowell, as a longtime friend, it's a story that should be told over and over, mm-hmm. because that's the opportunity that walks through the door.
But I'll tell you something interesting about George Campbell's gratitude. He had designed his first vessel, and he always lived at Dorchester, London. And he didn't have taxi fare when he was going for the interview to show the plans. And one of the room stewards at the hotel gave him the money for the taxi. And his plans were successful in that they were accepted. And, he took care of that man for the rest of his life, put him on pension.
So,
just a cab fare. Just a cab fare.
And I imagine
that bit of kindness,
And I imagine, because it sounds to me like he was almost like a mentor to you.
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that sort of approach is what's inspired you, and you've taken on that approach in the things that you do. I mean, there's no way that could not have impacted you to see that, because you were managing.
Well, it has, because, and I think he also understood when he was beginning to get old and fade, mm-hmm. and so he released more responsibility, and he was more open to new concepts. And also helping people and the staff. In Dockendale, ultimately he gave percentage of the company to many of the old retainers whom he held.
Did he have a family?
Just one daughter.
Okay. Okay.
His one daughter, who is an artist, lives in New York.
Okay.
Her name is Naomi Campbell. I always say Naomi Campbell without the phone.
Not the model.
Naomi Campbell without the phone.
Yeah, but that's remarkable, and I just hope you. I mean, I'm learning stuff here, and the thing is, this country is on the cusp, I think, of possibly some good things. We know that there's all the negative, but I think we're still poised to do some good things. And it seems to be, Lowell, that the one thing that is holding us back, I gave an example the other day, and I don't know how true it is, but someone had said it to me, that Bacardi, the motorcycle company, wanted to relocate its design team to the Bahamas. And that because they were tired of the Italian taxes and environment, etc. And our all approach to that was, well, we didn't want to give them that many work permits. Well, the reality is they're no Bahamian motorcycle designers. But maybe there would be sometime who is in school studying engineering who could now come back here and be in that company, aspire to be it because there's here, come back, and as a result, maybe they have the opportunity that Lowell Mortimer had when he was, And
I think that heads of agreement, a government can easily give them the work permits they require with a training training program for Bahamians, so that Bahamians would move into positions, and even if Bahamians do not move into positions, the country would be richer with more educated Bahamians. Right, because education is never lost.
Yeah. So we're going to take a break. Jerome, and I'm going to make a confession here. I invite people on the show, and as you know, I'm not big on prep. And Lowell asked me right before the question what we could talk about. And the reality is, this is the gems, right, that you find without having to have any kind of prep. You find these. This is a gem, and I hope that people are listening, because these are the opportunities that come if you're open-minded, if you're willing to absorb knowledge, and the sky is the limit if you are. So we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a treat, and I would really, really admonish my colleagues in the field to seek out people like Lowell Mortimer, and I'm not being obsequious here. There's so much wealth of the potential that we have that's untapped. And you know what? I didn't know what I was going to talk to Lowell Mortimer about today, but I'm just so glad that we invited him. So welcome once again, Lowell. Thank you for coming.
I did want to ask you, and it seems you were sort of in the right place at the right time when this gentleman walked in and asked about opening this account. But it would seem as if the relationship flourished and grew because he developed a trust of you. And you also took advantage of, not in a bad way, but took advantage of the opportunity. And I wonder if you could speak to how important that is, because a lot of times opportunities or people with opportunities present themselves to us, and we, for whatever reason, will either see it, squander it, or do something to lose their trust, or even lose the business. And that's what I'm getting at, and how important that is.
Because, he had a residence here, but he did not live here for a long time. And when you say trust, I suppose I had to work hard to let him see that I was worthy of his trust. Right. To do things or advise him, give him my best advice, so that at the end of the day, he would know what I was telling him was the truth and fair. And I also would point out pitfalls, so if he made a decision that was negative, he would know up front that I advised him otherwise. Mm-hmm. And this is his. And many of us, and I know there's temptation, and there must have been, because you're managing, as his attorney, you're managing and have trust over huge amounts of money. And, many of us, we can't seem to
handle that, I'm being diplomatic.
That's the point I was getting at as
Yeah,
well. You left here to sort of oversee all of this, and he's in Japan. I mean, I'm sure there would have been opportunities for you do all kinds of things, but you didn't.
So from the perspective of practicing law, how much of that did you do? What was the versus just managing his deal?
Well, the thing is that I never did much litigation or any litigation.
Right.
So I did all chamber work, corporate work, estates, land transfers, and so forth, but not much contracts. Not much So it was easy to fit into that mold.
Okay. Now, at some point, you assumed the chairmanship, I think, of this company, correct?
Yes.
Right. And I remember there were people, I would see them in the paper, and I say, boy, it's too bad I couldn't get on one of them trip. Anytime they want doing boat in India or doing boat in Japan, I see all these people who I know, they crack and bottle on ship and all that. I say, how to get on one of them trips, man? And I know Lowell travels in style. But you then decided at some point, and one of the things that I did see was how you got Bahamians involved in that firm at the very, very senior level. Talk about that and how you were able to restructure that.
Well, initially, Dockendale had all of the senior staff or other nationals. I don't want to say which one. Other nationals.
Right.
So I started feeding people whom I know were qualified into the Dockendale mode so that they could learn things about shipping. Galbraith's in London does a course in shipping. So I also saw, to help prepare Bahamians whom I knew for the company, I send them off to this. It's a 2 weeks intense course in shipping. They do ship financing, shipping contracts, and the whole gambit, but it's in a nutshell. So we got quite a few of those into this course. Then Dockendale itself went through some changes, and so we decided that Dockendale was moving out of the Bahamas and residing in, I think, India, went to India.
Okay.
And so that's when we formed Campbell Shipping and the building. And so Campbell Shipping, we threaded in more and more Bahamians. Then at one point we were managing, we had like about 18 ships on the water, and then we were managing like about 30 something.
And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, these are barges. These aren't little, boats.
Sorry?
These are major, super kind of barges.
Yeah, 36,000 tons.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. But then I began to think that, in India, that we have an office there right now, Campbell Shipping, where we recruit most of our on shipboard crew. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, but this is something that ought to be easy for Bahamians. If we are a Bahamian company, why shouldn't we start training staff who can go on board the ship? Because we help to fund the Maritime Academy in Mumbai. And I said, well, we need to look at something for the Bahamas so that we could offer this to Bahamians. And that's where the concept of LJM Maritime Academy.
Now tell us about that. So how many students graduate through there every year? How many are placed on ships? Do Bahamians have a feel to, I get kind of,
I will tell you what I know, and hoping that you don't ask me anything too technical.
I ask it technical. No, I don't know the
but
technical
then I'll have to send Dr. Claire
okay.
into you. You're able to take on classes or quadrants of cohorts of 50. That's for the cadet course, and that's basically like a 3-year course post high school. Then we have the courses offered for just shipboard hands. That could be 4 to 6 weeks. So it does different things for different things aboard the ship. But all of these cohorts offers helping you to survive on the ship. Some people do special courses in engineering part of the ship. And the academy has all of the simulators necessary for that would be on the ship. So they could create the weather, help you to read compasses, fire safety drill. All of that is over there on the
and so do these people almost have guaranteed placement after they go through this course?
Yes, just about. Yeah. We are able to take them on our ship. But one of the questions you asked earlier on, we also meet some resistance of people not thinking in terms of making a living at sea.
That's a big transition.
And so Dr. Clare has had to, in recruiting or letting high school students know that these positions are available, part of the orientation is to get parents to come in with their children so that the parents understand that they're going to be at sea, maybe in Australia, New Zealand, anywhere in the world for maybe 6 months. And they don't make a lot of money in cash. Let's say they may make our minimum wage $200 to $300. But you see, that's money they don't have to pay out because they provide clothing, everything on the ship. So that's clear money they have.
Right.
So,
and they get to see the world.
And they get to see the world.
I was about to say, that would seem to be the most attractive
especially
part
if you're young.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a free.
Let me
see if I could wind back some time, man.
Yeah. Basically, that's your pocket money. You do with that as you like. Everything else is taken care of.
To your family, the bank. So I think we have to make parents understand that, so the parents could be supportive of their child. When the child whines and say they get homesick, to encourage the child.
Right. So, would you think that would ever get to the point where that would become, or is it an objective for that to become sort of an international school, or you just want to focus on the domestic?
Hopefully, as soon as the academy is able to afford to build a dormitory, I think it can become an international school. But on the maritime aspect of it, all of us know that we are surrounded by plenty of water. Plenty of us can't swim. But we want to, and we hope that the academy can do courses, island or whole archipelago, which helps us to also respect the water, or not go out in a unlighted ship, vessel at night, a little boat, say you're fishing and so forth. I mean, we are used to doing that, but I think we have to get out of that mindset. And I think you've seen some accidents happen. And just helping people to be safe at sea and give bars real less problems.
I can imagine, and we're going to wind up this little piece here, but I can imagine that when you were growing up on the Fort Hill, you did not see yourself as a shipping magnate.
No, I didn't. I find the term still difficult.
But that's what it is. But I think, as we were growing up, and you would read about, one name that comes to my mind is Onassis. That's the name that comes to my mind when I hear shipping magnate. And of course, it also comes with the kind of a national connotation that you got to be Greek. I mean, that's how you think. You have these closed-minded kind of boxes that you put yourself in, and so look, the sky is the limit, really. I mean, granted, you came into it by good fortune, but it doesn't mean now
stumbled
into it. But it doesn't mean now people who are making careers at Campbell's can't. I can imagine the ultimate goal for you would be to see that someone who is now at Campbell's somehow spins off and has his own shipping company someday.
No, I wouldn't even go that far. If I could see one of the people from the academy become a captain of one of the ships, that would be...
Yeah. Are there people
quite
who
a
are
thing
in
to
that
see.
kind of
We have a few people
path?
who are in that.
They wouldn't be making minimum wage then.
Oh no.
Are we taking advantage of it though? I mean, you speak about the recruitment effort and bringing in the parents and stuff, which is important. But are we taking taking advantage
yes
of it?
No, I'd say no, we're not taking quite as advantage of it as we could.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think we have a lot of people, even though the fees are not what we consider huge for university or for tertiary education, still a lot of people who can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But, we have more and more sponsors.
Okay.
And I think the government has taken keener interest, and the shipping companies have started. Carnival and...
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine. Do they have stuff like that in Florida? These kind of academies?
There is academy in Florida, but the shipping, their interest also, and which will be to the academy's advantage, when their people come in sometime, they all have to do retraining and so forth, so the academy is able to help them with training, like one-day training when they're in port.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge industry.
Yeah, it's vast, but I think you have to just position yourself to take advantage of it.
Because of our who we are, where we're located, we're surrounded by water. I always wonder why more Bahamians are not involved in various aspects of the maritime industry.
Well, this is why the Greeks are so. They're Greek Isles. This is why they're engaged in the process. Well, what's next for Lowell Mortimer? I mean, he's an accomplished attorney. I know that you're involved in some hospitality aspects. You don't like the term, Mr. I got to find a Greek way of saying Mortimer now. Okay, Mortimer Palapoulos or something like that. I think I think when you compare, yourself to the vast majority of Bahamians out there. I mean, there used to be a show on CNN called Pinnacle. You would be on that show, okay? There's no doubt about that. You would have been on that show because you are certainly at the pinnacle, and I don't even know if people realize to what extent. So what's next?
Nothing. I think I've achieved most of it. Just fade into the night.
But I mean, at this stage of the game, I guess philanthropy and that sort of thing is what's on your...
Yeah, and help where I can in certain things, and continue to try to make a difference.
Yeah. You talked about, because this is your birthplace now, so I'm going to put you in a little box, about the potential of that Fort Hill area becoming an enclave. Would that be something that you could see yourself being a part of? Or is that something you...
In a small way, yes.
Yeah,
I would want to see it successful.
Yeah. That's where you're,
Yeah, well, that whole area of Mesa Dish and the Fort Hill, that whole area is, would interest me to see it really blossom and become something special for the Bahamas.
Well, Lowell, I want to thank you for coming. I don't know why when I thought of, we think about people to bring on, I don't even know why your name popped into my mind. I'm going to be honest with you. But I'm glad it did, because I've certainly learned a lot. And I hope that Bahamians, my fellow Bahamians who are, it's kind of, pertinent, independence. This is an example of an independent Bahamian who has made his way in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And, we don't, it's like the other day, Barry Rassin came back from being the president of Rotary International. It's huge.
Huge honor, yes.
Huge. And I don't know if to this day, if he has been recognized for that accomplishment, which is very sad. And so I hope that people, when they're listening to this show today, realize the vastness of your experience, the vastness of your accomplishment. And I'm proud to call you my friend of many, many, and any one of them like friend of, like I just know you, I don't have to know you for years and years, but I know you, and I'm very happy to have had you on and let the folks hear what you've had to say. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
All right. Ken, always a pleasure, my friend. Jerome, you're fired.
Thank you very much. Until you need me again, it's okay. I take that. That's fine. Fine.
Yeah, I got to always call you back.
Yeah, that's okay.
You're not fired. You're just I'm laying you off.
I'm on reprieve.
I'm laying you off.
Taking a
very quickly.
Yeah, it always goes quickly.
Yeah,
That's what I tell you. So thank you very much, folks, for listening, and we'll see you on Monday. Our guest, what is Monday going to be?
The day after Sunday.
But once
you mean
again,
the date, 15th?
But once again, I always forget the date.
15th.
I want to say
15th.
No, it isn't going to be Philip Bethel. He's coming on next Monday. I'll let you know. I'll guess as we get closer. We'll be back on Monday. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, very much.